Hey there, welcome to GoodFellas History, where me and the fellas discuss major historical events, current events. Welcome to the show. My name is Nick, and...
My name's Garrett.
Go ahead, Davis.
And I'm Davis. Welcome to the show, everyone. It's alright. You know what leads into it? I'm kicking us off today anyways. We have a few topics we're going to discuss. The first one is going to be the new Texas abortion bill that just passed. That was actually signed into law by the current governor. Basically, it's banning abortions as early as 6 weeks, which is what it comes down to. So,
Hey.
to put it in perspective, a menstruation cycle takes 4 weeks. So we're talking you have to get everything scheduled in and documented for an abortion in 2 weeks, basically.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are saying it's basically kind of banning abortions without banning abortions because it's such a limited time frame and you've got to be moving like that. To put it in perspective, like 93% of all abortions happen after a 6-week period.
Mm-hmm.
So you're cutting almost every single abortion you could get out of the equation.
Yeah, I mean, but let's understand. I mean, ironically enough, I actually think that this is probably not a sign of strength, but a sign of weakness from Texas Republicans. Because the last election in 2020 showed that Texas is not quite as red as it used to be. So, one of the big problems that the Texas legislature is going to be running into is, what if Matthew McConaughey becomes the next governor of Texas? And I think that there's something, like, all jokes aside, I think there's something to that. The theory of the juggernaut Republican Party has always been a bit of an illusion in my mind, because it's based on the presumption that somehow the Republican Party just have like this magic ability to convince people to vote for stupid things, when in reality it's just they understand power better than the lay Democrat. So this is just red meat to their base.
Blackpill us so early on with this, but while I agree that it's a sign that the Republican Party is kind of flailing in Texas, I do have a lot of concerns because with the Mississippi abortion bill that passed, which is you can't get an abortion after 15 weeks, that one's actually heading to the Supreme Court. As we speak.
And
a very conservative-leaning Supreme Court right now.
And the thing is that at the end of the day, the consequence of that legislation is going to naturally lead to blowback. Because, I mean, the thing is that as much as these people talk about states' rights and states' ability to control things, this is infringing on people's rights, infringing on people's liberties. If the Democratic Party was smart, they'd let them go with these draconian policies, as bad as that sounds. I mean, I'm a guy. I'm not gonna pretend that I don't have a penis. So, I'm not the one that's going to be adversely affected by the legislation. So I just want to get that out there. But at the end of the day, this is a galvanizing point, and a lot of conservative women are going to be nodding up and down saying, yeah, we're going to go along with this, but might be really pissed off that this is, in the middle of a pandemic, middle of a recession, middle of all these things, that they are now basically being infringed upon so that, Mitch McConnell can have, like, another year in power. Like,
I don't know how far I agree with that, because abortion's one of the Republican Party's, generally speaking, like, strongest points. That's how they get a lot of, like, the conservative, like, Christian base across, like, the country to rally behind them. Like,
so I agree with you, but I think that we also got to take into consideration how big that base is. So let's really be honest, like, and let's also understand that there are major hypocrisies that are beginning to form structurally in that base that are undermining it right now. So the moral majority that you saw with Nixon and then Reagan, and particularly Reagan was able to successfully get evangelical voters to come out and vote for him in droves by throwing out red meat like this. But if you actually look at the Reagan administration and Reagan's policies, very rarely did they touch on these issues. It was mostly rhetoric. When the rubber hits the road, that causes natural blowback. So, if this legislation is passed in Texas, and these legislation bills continue to be passed in these right-wing red states, there's going to be a natural consequence to that. And one of the natural consequences of that is eventually it's going to lead to a crisis where they can't ignore these issues, and it's going to motivate people to come out to vote against them. The problem is that the Democrats are so flippin' scared to actually run in these states, offering socially liberal or, economically liberal policies because they think that they're going to get pummeled, when in reality, I think the reason why the Republican Party win in a lot of these states is that they run virtually unopposed. Like the state legislature issue that that we need to talk about. I mean, this is being passed not by the federal government, but by like the state of Texas, the state of Mississippi, the state of Pennsylvania, which is used to be blue states. All Pennsylvania flipped to Trump, but they didn't flip to Trump because they're ultra conservative. It flipped to Trump because the Democratic coalition in the state legislature election didn't come out to vote. So this is an issue with the Democratic Party and the left coalition. How are we going to get into power, and how are we going to be able to maintain that power? I mean, that's the key thing. Removing the Republican Party from power from the state level to the federal level should be the number one goal of the left. Because, they're the biggest threat. It's the difference between knowing who your enemy is and knowing who your rival is. The Democratic Party is our rival to power, but we can work with our rival. We can compromise with our rival. Our enemy is the Republican Party. They're the antithesis of basically everything we basically stand for as the left.
Yeah.
I agree. I know that Democratic turnout has always been the hardest thing to get. Really, that's kind of our biggest issue, is getting our bases out to vote. But right now, I feel like this issue is almost something of the Republican Party can almost fight against the Democratic Party behind, because
Well, that's because the Democrats allow them to cede the moral high ground. Here's the thing. I will be more than happy to tell a person that's pro-life that they are full of shit. They can wave the Bible in front of me, but man, they're televangelists. Let me just be honest. If their clergy are getting caught having sex with pool boys, or having their wives have sex with pool boys, name one righteous figure. Name one. They don't have the moral authority anymore. And the thing is the Democratic Party allows them to do that. And the left allows them to do that to a certain degree as well. No, they don't have the moral authority. They voted for fucking Trump, for Christ's sakes. This dude is a lech. Everything that they think of when they think of Hollywood, actor, celebrity, is the is personified by Donald Trump, and he was their hero. So the reality is, it has nothing to do with morality. It's everything to do with power. And so, yeah, let the Republicans run on abortion. Let them do it. Let them galvanize their support. Abortion, 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 abortion. The issue is, how do we counter that? And one way to counter that is say, you have no moral authority. This is not going to solve any flippin' issue. The issue of teenage pregnancy is not just an issue of, people being irresponsible. It's an issue of the fact that parents work multiple jobs now. There's very little social interaction between parents and kids, or at least a lot less. Structurally speaking, many of the people that are getting pregnant at a young age are also from an economic disadvantage. This has nothing to do with morality. It's everything to do with power. And it's everything about saying, I'm going to control you and your life because I can, because I want to. So, it's the reframing of the argument that's the really important part when it comes to this. And yeah, right now the Republican Party is doing really well with that, and some of it is the fact that there are a lot of Democrats that go along with it, and they allow the narrative of the moral authority to fall on them. This is the real problem that I have with the Democratic Party right now. The Republican Party has no moral authority. The alt-right or super conservative or the conservative movement has no moral authority. They've lost that. They sacrificed that in the name of power, and they relinquished it. So if you want to galvanize that moral authority, then you need to use it. Not recede it every single time you're worried that you're going to get some crazed batshit Marjorie Taylor Greene type in one of your town halls.
I agree, and I kind of disagree, because I feel like the Democratic Party, if we were to go on a moral high ground issue with this, we could easily beat down the Republican Party in talking points on this. But I feel like the Republican base doesn't care. a lot of it is like a
No, they
super,
don't.
like emotional need of like we're protecting some like unborn infant, the voiceless, the silent. That's
Well-
a hard like topic to kind of break someone out of, like a tough mentality to get through.
Mhm. Well, can we also, like, kind of touch on the fact that it's a heartbeat bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can we kind of talk about the fact that, like, I know it's, like, you know, them justifying and, like, trying to, like, humanize this clump of cells, let's be honest, especially this early on. But when it comes to your heart, it's an important organ, pumps blood, but, I mean, if we were trying to, quote-unquote, like, show, like, oh, this is a person inside you, da-da-da, like, wouldn't we put more emphasis on brain activity? Or, like, you know what I mean? Because we have a lot of important organs. I mean, why don't we ever talk about kidneys? Or, like, you know what I mean? It's kind of
The heart
weird.
is
Like,
one of like your first organs to develop when you're like in
Yeah.
the womb.
And that's why.
no, but...
And it's also a cultural thing. So like, if you say, oh well, look, it has a heartbeat. I mean, think of the social, you know, what's the word I'm thinking of? The social gravitas, I guess, would be a word for it, of the term heart. It has a heartbeat. Living things have hearts. So it's a selling point. But I mean, the thing is that these selling points are 30, 40 years old, right? These talking points are 30, 40 years old. But go ahead, Garrett.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get there's, you know, obviously a lot of, like, social, historical, like, cultural emphasis on the heart. People at one point did used to believe that, you know, your emotions stemmed from your heart. But, you know, scientifically, we just know that's not really the case, and so it's just very, and again, I'm sure a lot of these people just are running with it. The, like, you know, people who support this bill, they probably do know that. They're just trying to, you know, put like an emotional kind of aspect to it. Like, it has a heartbeat, you can hear it, like, all this stuff. But really, like, at the end of the day, a heart, while it's important for life, I think the brain is so much more. Like, if we want to
look at the brain.
if we want to make a deadline for abortion in a lot of cases, obviously not, you know, like, extenuating circumstances, then why don't we look at the brain? Why are we doing this weird, oh, well, it has a heartbeat now you can't terminate the pregnancy?
Well, I mean, it gets back to the whole point that this is not about the child. It's nothing to do with. It's nothing to do with the fetus. It's nothing to do with it. It's about power. And so, like, what you're rationalizing makes sense to get people who don't vote Republican or who are not sold on these issues to come out and vote. But that's the key thing. So to answer your earlier question, Davis, is that yeah, the Republican base, most of these people are too far gone when it comes to this issue.
Yeah.
They're bought and sold, and the thing is it also allows them to rationalize slut shaming, dehumanizing the other, teenage mom, welfare queen, all these stereotypes. And so the thing is that the trick is not appealing to those people. Most of them are not going to be sold, even if you have a argument from the Bible. I mean, there's arguments from the Bible why we shouldn't shave our sideburns. You know, in Leviticus itself, you know, the same thing that they used to bash on gay people. There are arguments about not eating shellfish and sideburns. So, you know, what are we going to go with this? It has nothing to do with that. It's about power. It's about controlling people. It's that fascist inclination that exists in this community, and the reality is the Democratic Party, its goal is not to convince those people. The goal of the Democratic Party is to convince more people to come out to vote for them than for the other guy. And honestly, you know, we could talk about heartbeat bills, we can talk about, you know, brain activity in the fetus, but what we really should be talking about is the fact that why is it so many children are unsupervised? Why are there so many teenage pregnancies in certain states as opposed to other states? Why are, and more importantly, why are we so willing to condemn these people and these children to, what, being children raising children? This is a big consequence. And like back in the day when we were all living in farms and we only knew people in the community, maybe you could get away with the argument of, well, the community will be able to help raise the kid. We don't have that anymore. We're atomized. Yeah. So there's no rational argument for this. There's no logic to this. It's just about power. The Republican Party sees this as an issue that allow them to stay in power, and they're going to throw red meat at their base.
So while I do agree, there is one part of this bill we haven't touched on yet that I want to get into because I actually think it shoots down part of the Republican talking point, though. We haven't talked about this yet, but a big part of the Republican talking point is, well, I don't like abortion with the exception of rape.
Mm-hmm.
This bill actually does not allow abortions past 6 weeks, including rape and incest.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this is beyond the pale extreme. So I think that actually we could, because it's so extreme, turn a few Republicans even on that head with this as well.
Well, it's that Lord Farquaad quote. I love this quote from the first Shrek movie. It's a risk I'm willing to let you take. Which basically means that I'm more than happy to have you become the sacrificial lamb to my moral anxiety. Because understand, like, the abortion issue is a moral panic. But it's a moral panic that's stuck, and it's stuck because it's a really tender subject, right? Like, this is, like, let's be honest, like, there are people that probably, no doubt, actually really believe, this. That, they believe in this higher consciousness of the soul and all this. So, I mean, I don't want to discount those people. Let's certainly be honest. Many of those people also are for the death penalty.
Yep.
True.
And I think another, with Davis, what you're talking about, how it's so extreme that it might help turn Republicans who are pro-life but do kind of give exceptions, is the fact that, and Nick, we kind of touched on this a little bit the other day, is that when you miscarry under this bill, under a really restrictive abortion bill, they investigate that because they need to make sure you're not throwing yourself down the stairs, that you're not drinking whatever, that you're not using the coat hangers, that you're not, you know what I mean? And so
they have a whole pamphlet you have to fill out for it. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, so something that could be caused simply by just, acts of nature are now deemed as potential. And once again, this is the party of free speech. Logic, bro. No. You don't have that. And this is where I get frustrated with the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party knew what they were doing, they'd be mean as hell to the Republicans. They would go out of their way to basically call out their BS. And that would antagonize the Republican Party base. But what's their comeback? Well, you're just a damn Yankee, you don't know nothing. Okay, fine, I'm a damn Yankee, they don't know nothing. But at least I'm not a guy that's voting for a guy that's basically a rapist. Possible pedophile. I was too young to vote for Bill Clinton. I probably wouldn't have voted for Bill Clinton back then. Maybe Ross Perot. I'm kidding, guys.
I was about to say, I was like, okay.
But my point is that, even Bill Clinton back then, it gets back to this whole power issue. So, this is a larger systemic issue when it comes to power as well. Why is it that all this legislation is particularly targeting women?
The Republican Party is a misogynistic party.
Well,
yeah.
That, and also I would dare say we are a more misogynist society.
True.
Let's think about this. Who really is the person that has to deal with this, right? What's funny is that you have these really stringent legislation about, taking the baby all the way to birth, but are there stricter legislation being put into place to force the parent, the father, the other part of this equation, to parent that kid?
No.
Kind of funny that, right?
Yeah.
If you really want to have this moral argument, why is it that you don't have legislation in place to actually force the adult, the kid, the 14-year-old that had sex with the other 14-year-old? It takes two to tango. So why is that? And it gets back to the whole thing, power. This is not about morality. That's no issue. That's not the issue of this. It's about power. It's about control.
Yeah.
So you have some old geezer grandpa type who, those sluts, they need to be more responsible. Well, okay, why is it just the girl?
Yeah.
Somebody had to impregnate her. Why is the guy not being held up to account?
Well, then you maybe throw like a scenario back at them, and you're like, all right, well, why don't we, advocate for more men to get vasectomies or whatever, and then always men get mad, whatever. Oh, you shouldn't like be saying like they kind of unironically.
It's my
are just
body.
like, well, it's my body. I'm like, well, yeah.
Oh, no kidding. No shit. Wait. You're telling me that you don't like the idea of the government passing legislation forcing you to do something with your body that's going to have long-term replications for your life?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's not such a good thing.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the thing. If
I agree.
Here's a piece of legislation I wouldn't mind. If the girl doesn't want to have the baby, okay, but she's in a Republican state and so she can't get an abortion, the person who made her pregnant is now responsible for that baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it have to be just the woman? Like, men can just opt out of parenting like so many times. Even like not even in the case of like if the woman wants the baby but the man doesn't. I mean, there's so many stories of women just being like, oh, okay, like you can just go, or they just
or it's just child support.
Child support, and they don't, and like
And as soon as they move to another state, it becomes that much harder to enforce the child support, because then you have to get into login, you have to get another lawyer to actually go after the person, and so like there's so many steps into this that basically force this role onto the woman where she has to be the mother, but the man doesn't have to be a father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
because again, it goes back to it doesn't actually matter once the baby's born.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, it's back to that whole, it's control, it's, this weird, like, holier-than-thou attitude, oh, well, I care about all the babies, blah, 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 when you don't, you don't actually.
Here's a good policy. If a woman doesn't want to take care of the kid, I think the Republican state senator, should be forced to adopt the child.
There we go.
Let's just put their money where their mouth is. I mean, like, if they really care about the future generation of the Republic of Texas or Pennsylvania or wherever, then they should be forced to deal with that responsibility.
Or even, and I saw this on a TikTok the other day, this woman really, like, gave a great perspective. It's like, let's go all the way with it. Mm-hmm. If a fetus is a person at 6 weeks, let's, let the mom can get life insurance on them, and then if they miscarry, they can collect.
Yeah.
If it's an immigrant mother, maybe they illegally immigrated here but then got pregnant, they can't be deported because they're carrying a U.S. citizen. Like, let's go all the way then.
Yeah. If we're gonna play these games,
bring out the based arguments.
Yeah. If this is the game they want to play, go with it. Because I mean, like you said, I mean, this is what I'm talking about, though. What you just did right there, what we've been doing, is what the Democratic Party should be doing. Not this, oh, but it's just a woman's body and a right to choose. Okay, that's a valid argument. But that's not where the argument should end. The argument should end with, and if that's the game you want to play, let's play this game. Bring it on. That punchy, bring it on mentality can be a little deconstructive sometimes, but you need to have fight. It kind of reminds me of a quote I heard about Lyndon Johnson. Like, a lot of people called Lyndon Johnson a son of a bitch, and one of his advocates said, yeah, but he's our son of a bitch. Mm-hmm. Like, that's I mean, I love that. It's such a great quote, because it's like, listen, it's about power. So, Mitch McConnell's a son of a bitch, but he's the Republican Party's son of a bitch. Same thing with Donald Trump. And there's something to that. And it's not just, oh, it's divisive. No, people want to know that the person that they voted for is going to fight for the issues that they said they were going to run on. Mm-hmm. This will cause a lot of pearl-clenching in Washington, D.C., but who the fuck cares? Hell, even the people in Washington, D.C., like the majority of the people in Washington, D.C., are not column writers for major newspapers. Mm-hmm. Most of them are average, everyday, working-class people and people of color who wouldn't mind seeing anybody actually stand up for their issues. So, I'm glad you brought that up, Garrett, because, I mean, that's 100% the direction we need to be going. And that's coalition building.
I think this is also, it's interesting because the Republican Party is supposedly the pull yourself up by your bootstraps party until it comes to bodily autonomy for women.
Oh.
Realistically, it's like the state needs to stay out of everything except bodily functions.
Well, it's about power. I mean, this is the thing. This is why it's really easy to say the Republican Party is a fascist institution. I mean, the enemy is both weak and strong, and there's some kind of moral decay. Like, are you kidding me? Like, let's just look at the noir films from the 1950s and the late 1940s, early 1950s. Like, the idea of moral decay in the big city is as old as the big city. These are narratives. These are talking points. That's all they are, and they're reinforced based off of institutional rivalries through political parties and political factions in our country. In layman's term, city folk don't lack the big city folk, and little town folk don't lack the big city folk. And so that's it. You know, there's loose morals in the city because, you know, a preacher who is a reactionary asshole visits New York once and sees that there's actually Irish, you know, who aren't Protestant, you know, going to mass. Ooh, my God, that's sinful. It's once again, it's about power. Like, the reactionary element to this is about power. It's about fear. These people are scared, and when people are scared, they try to act tough. They're the they're the blowfish party. That's what the Republican Party's symbol should be, a blowfish. Because that's all they do. They puff up. That's all they do. They puff up, and the Democratic Party is letting them scare them. I don't know why. Like yeah, maybe it's because like they have PTSD from like the 70s and 80s, but most of the people who are in Congress now were not in Congress back then. So I mean, we live in a different society. The Republican Party is pushing these personhood bills. If that's the case they want to make, then okay. Fetuses are 100% U.S. citizens and have every right that a U.S. child would have, and the parents of those kids would have every right that a parent in our nation would have. If we want to play this game, let's play this game. I have no problem with that. So the childhood tax credit, I think that 14-year-old girl that's pregnant with this should get a childhood tax credit. The government should be paying her to carry that baby to term. If we want to play that game.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
also, let's let, since 16-year-olds, you know, if a 16-year-old wanted to go adopt a baby, we wouldn't let that happen.
Yeah.
But if we want to let this bill go, again, let's go all the way once more. Mm-hmm. Let's let 16-year-old, you know, couples or whatever, let's let them adopt kids. Mm-hmm. Let's let them, like, buy a home. Let's let, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
if they are responsible enough to
raise a kid,
to be in, you know, be raped and be pregnated, but they're not responsible enough to, you know, do all these other things, then let's just go all the way with it again.
Yeah.
Let's
go all the way. I mean, there's a really great movie about, it has Bryan Cranston in it, and it's called All the Way. And it's about LBJ. He plays LBJ. And I love that movie. Because it kind of reminds me of The Irishman, in that it's not the racism and the bigotry that's appealing. They show that. It's the mentality of going all the way. This is why the Democratic Party loses. The Republican Party understands power. Throw at me to your base and attack. Keep going. Come from all sides. They don't care if they attack from the left. No, they don't care. They don't care because it's not about winning a moral majority. It's about getting more people to come out to vote for you on election day than the other guy. That's always what it's been. It's always what it's been. So this is where, you know, we need as a coalition to get past the frivolity of how dare you, sir. Because civility politics is a real pain in the ass. Because I mean, it's empty. It's kind of like, you know, what is it? I'm trying to think of a gum. It's like bubble gum, right? Like it tastes really great for the first 10 seconds, and then after that, it's tasteless. You know, and all you're left is this tasteless thing where you remember, you know, how good it tasted at the beginning. That's the Democratic Party right now. They're like pink Hubba Bubba gum. You know, tastes good at the beginning, but then it just becomes bland, tasteless form that you're stuck with, that you may be able to blow a bubble with if it's not too chalky. But I mean, I know that's a great analogy. So the Republican Party should be a blowfish, and the Democratic Party should be a stick of gum.
Oh my god.
But that's where we're at, and so this is where I get really frustrated with online left and a lot of lefty circles, is that small militant organized organizations aren't going to lead to any kind of change in this country.
I agree.
Christianity did not explode in the Roman Empire because they remained doctrinally pure. Okay, they went all over the place, and every neighborhood you went to was almost like a different Christian religion, almost, with some just basic doctrinal similarities. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is, I might not be religious, and I'm not interested in protecting the sanctity of Christianity, but the methods. The left needs to be missionaries of our agenda. We need to be convincing people who are not converted to our goals. How do you do that?
I think you just give your best arguments and...
Give them an argument! Like with Ben Burgess. You know who Ben Burgess is, guys? He's a professor who used to be on to TMBS. I've been listening to a few of his podcasts, and it's called Give Them an Argument. And we need to give them an argument. We need to make a case for our beliefs and for our issues.
Yeah.
Just moralizing and antiquating that this is wrong because it's wrong doesn't work. No, we need to go all the way. If this is the game the Republican Party wants to play, we can play it too. It's smash mouth football, guys. It's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and get back up and hit back. So that's what we got to be about, and we need to start finding candidates that are able to do that. Like AOC, she's one tough cookie. Like I honestly think that my respect for the squad has grown over time because they've become far more disciplined and far more focused on what they're trying to do, because they understand full well that they're an extreme minority in a sea of blue.
So when they strike hard too.
And they do it organized. They have coherent arguments. The right flips out, and the same CNN bobblehead idiots in the center say the same things, but it loses its coherence because it's just a straight-up argument. They're not calling out individuals. They're not demonizing anybody. They're just making a strong argument for their case. That's what you got to do.
Agreed.
Yeah, me
But
too.
suffice to say, if they bring this to Utah, I'm more than happy to go to the bat and say, no, okay, if we're going to go down this road, I want this, this, and this in it.
Oh, God. I mean, and if it happened, I feel like if it can happen somewhere in Texas, I mean, again, this is Greg Abbott we're talking about. But
And he might
still,
lose.
Texas is a lot... I don't know, maybe it's not completely accurate to say it's, like, on the cusp of turning blue, but there's, again, it has a bigger population, and a lot of people themselves, like, are left-wing. And then, so if it happens somewhere in Texas, I mean, I feel like it's very feasible to happen here.
So when does gerrymandering fail?
What was that?
When does gerrymandering fail?
Not sure.
That's a good question.
When the political values within those communities begin to shift.
Yeah.
And so, in reality, this bill might cause that shift to happen. Because here's the thing. For every right-wing, hardcore, slut-shaming, anti-abortion figure there's somebody's dad and somebody's mom that are going to be directly affected by this. And the fun thing about conservatives is they don't care about these issues until it happens to them.
Yep.
And now that this is so restrictive, they now are left with a huge burden. Because they can either basically kick their kid out of their life for moral reasons of how dare you get pregnant, which most of these people are huge hypocrites to begin with because they probably had sex when they were teenagers, let's really be honest.
Yeah.
Most people do. Statistically speaking, the vast majority of people lose their virginity before they turn 18 years old.
Garrett, why are you looking at me?
Huh?
Yeah, Davis, you pervert. How dare you? Don't you know that the magical number 18 is the moment that you're allowed to do anything? And that's the thing, too, that I'm really glad you brought that up, Garrett, is that 18 is a magical number for for a lot of things, but for some reason, we expect a 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 15, 16-year-old girl who has no adulthood. So she has no sovereignty in our legal system. She's technically still, under her parents', what's the word, authority, I guess. Jurisdiction.
Legal jurisdiction.
And we expect them to raise a kid?
Yeah.
A baby?
They just last week had to ask their teacher in high school to go if they could go to the bathroom.
Or
Exactly.
oftentimes have to ask their parents for a ride to school still.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Let's think about that. Like, let's instead of the moral outrage that's expected, let's talk about the moral outrage that is. Let's think of the real consequences of this. The real consequences of this is that it's going to make a larger proportion of our society that much more miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And no amount of slut-shaming and rah that this is going to give to the Republican Party is going to countenance that, so long as the left actually has a coherent message. Because I want to tell those teenage girls, there's a party that you can vote for to get, your payback with. And if the Democrats were smart, it'd be like, okay, well, we're going to take care of these kids then.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Welfare queens, bring it on. I want more welfare queens. If we're going to have to deal with the flipping Trumps, the Kardashians, I'd rather have some podunk, blue-collar, redneck girl have some basic income working at a goddamn Dairy Queen than the fucking Kardashians. Because more likely than not, that girl is going to be a person of color. Because mom and dad in wealthier white neighborhoods probably will have the money to go to another state to have that abortion.
Yeah.
Well, there's studies that have shown that abortion bills and whatnot disproportionately affect minority communities too. And that's what's extra unfortunate is it's already hitting people that are going to be more likely in poverty or just more desperate in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's super unfortunate.
Oh yeah, of course it is. But Davis, you're missing the point. Those people need to be kept in their place. This is the Republican mindset, guys. I mean, no matter how much how much the Republican Party is modernized, this is the same exact Dixiecrat crowd that my dad had to grow up with when he was in the South. These are the same folks, same patterns of thought. This gets back to my whole point of hegemony. It's not changed. There are some people who are deserving of the world's nice things, and there's some people that aren't deserving of it. And these things are reinforced through religious institutions, our education institution, and our political institution, particularly in the South, but also throughout the country. And the Republican Party is the champion of those things. That's why they have power right now. You remove the Republican Party from power, those institutions themselves are going to begin to lose power. And that's how we change the system structurally.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of reminds me of the whole, just before, people received gay rights in this country with the right to marry, there was a huge amount of anti-gay legislation. So I'm hoping that this is just the last hurrah on this issue. But
Yeah, that's a good point.
I hope, I am worried, but I hope that is what happens and turns out.
And I know, of course, a lot of Texans are not okay with this. I've seen videos of huge marches, they, saying F Greg Abbott, all this stuff. I do think there is validity in that argument of the last hurrah, before we kind of cross that threshold, and then it doesn't really, at least in a huge way, in a way that matters, come up again.
Well, what will be interesting.
I can only hope.
What will be interesting is how the Supreme Court rolls on this.
That's what I wanted to bring up, and that's actually, honestly, this Texas bill is appalling, and I think we can all agree on that. We know it's appalling. My fear is that since it's heading to the Supreme Court, which is conservative-dominated right now, that this is some ammunition that they can bring into the conversation regarding the Mississippi abortion bill.
Well, what will happen, and this is where, this is where my hope with Biden kind of lies. Because right now, I think Biden doesn't give a shit about the typical Democrat values right now. He's an old man. He's going to die in the next decade. He knows that. Screw it. Pack the court.
Yeah.
I think that this will give him ammunition to do that. If you're going to go all the way with this and basically say, no, actually we're overturning Roe v. Wade and not have a political backlash, you're an idiot. Like, and what is also interesting is that at the same time in Texas that this abortion bill got passed, they tried passing voter restriction and it didn't work.
True.
So I think people are starting to get fed up with this shit. And that's the thing that we need to feed on. We should be mad. The people in Texas should be mad. They just went through one of the worst winters in their life.
Oh,
And the Texas government is focusing on abortion?
Yeah.
This tells you where their minds are. The Republican Party doesn't give a damn about the people in Texas. Just like they don't give a damn about the people in Mississippi. These are Dixiecrats. These are not rich. These are not rags to riches stories. These are rich boys and rich girls. You know where they spend their winters? In California. In Florida. In Cancun.
Ooh, call them out. Yes, Garrett.
Well,
Yeah.
that's actually very valid. I'm pretty sure this dude already had that planned out.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
They spend it in Florida, they spend it in Cancun, they spend it in California, they spend it in places that are warm, nice, and secluded.
Yeah.
They don't spend it in Texas. These are rich folks. These people have a second home in Hollywood. Or in McCall, in Idaho. You know, let's really be honest here. I mean, the reality is the Republican Party is all show and no stay. All the Democratic Party has to do is drive a wedge between the show and the stay in the Republican Party, and they'll begin to lose. Especially once Mitch McConnell kicks the bucket. Because I don't know if he has anybody in the Senate that's his protege that he's been training up. If Mitch McConnell passes away tomorrow, I think the Republican Party's in deep shit. Because I don't know who will fill his shoes.
Yeah.
What's the one guy with the eye patch?
Oh, he's Crenshaw? I think he's a representative,
yeah.
not a senator, so...
Oh, true.
Yeah, I don't think he's a senator.
Like,
Yeah, never mind.
like I would love it if it was Mitt Romney.
Safe.
I would love it if it was Mitt Romney. That'd be. I would pray for that because that would be an interesting scenario.
How unfortunate that that's what our prayers have come to.
Well,
God.
I'm going to give Mitt Romney some credit. I think that the guy, as ridiculous of a presidential campaign as he ran, this guy was the governor of Massachusetts. And while he was governor of Massachusetts, he made some mistakes. He did govern well with the Democratic Party. And most of the people, even to this day, still remember his governorship of Massachusetts very fondly. So, I don't think the guy's batshit. His problem is that he's got a huge faction in his Senate of people that are crazy. And Mitch McConnell's been able to control them because he's so ruthless that he doesn't care. So long as they come out to vote for him and his bills, he will throw red meat at that group of people all the time. Mitt Romney, on the other hand, I don't know what he's going to do. Because I think he's fully capable of being bullied by that faction. And so that leads to the other faction of people who, you know, it's all show. They're not really interested in this. They'll vote along with it to get their legislation through. I mean, right now, I think everybody was talking about how the Democratic Party was going to, you know, break up after Bernie Sanders. But I don't think that that's the case. I think the Republican Party is far more fragile.
I agree. I actually think, really, because of Trump, the Republican Party is in an interesting predicament, actually.
Well,
Like, you've got the old diehards, and then you have the other ones trying to appease that old Trump, like the new Trump base and whatnot. It'll be interesting to see if they last or not.
since Reagan on,
Yeah,
the
for real.
Republican Party had an establishment.
Nick, I think you're muted.
Oh, you can't hear me?
Oh no.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you, Nick.
Uh-oh. How about now?
No. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Might have to cut that out.
It's alright. It humanizes the conversation.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it gets back to the point that since Reagan on, there has been an establishment inside the Republican Party of shot callers. Trump destroyed them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't exist anymore. So it's not so much Trump as so much that the Republican Party, I mean, who's the leader of the Republican Party after Trump? After George W. Bush, I mean, it was McCain, McConnell, Romney, Huckabee. These were prominent figures in the Republican Party, so they were able to kind of coalesce with each other, and it became anti-Obama, Tea Party, rah, 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 rah. Typical Republican talking points that they truss up differently. With Trump, he destroyed his rivals, and they stayed out.
That's true.
So who's the leader of the Republican Party now? Is it still Trump?
Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio? Is it Marco Rubio? Is it Tom Cotton? You know, is it Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Oh, God.
Like, who is it? Dan Crenshaw? You know, these idiots that have these commercials? And the thing is like, yeah, these people are idiots. But, you know, it's not that they, you know, they have, you know, it's they're cringy. I don't care that, you know, that they, you know, make stupid arguments. I think that, yeah, they have stupid arguments and people come out to vote for those arguments. They always give their base an argument. You know, I think that we could point out, you know, the commercial. Like, dude, do you really think that you're a James Bond? If one of his rivals, you know what, I would pay money to see a Democrat in the debate ask him, do you think you're James Bond or something?
Mm-hmm.
You know, hold them accountable for the stupid shit they say, you know? It's like, come on.
Jesus.
This is really silly. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm optimistic insofar as I think the Republican Party is leaderless right now.
Mm-hmm.
There are two camps. There's the Trump camp and everyone else. And right now, Mitch McConnell is one of the few figures that is holding this together. And he doesn't have much life left in him.
That's fair. I
mean,
think that's fair. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the coming days.
Mm-hmm.
I just think we need to, while maybe we can be optimistic, I think we should be wary.
Well,
because it's in some dangerous it's hitting some dangerous spots right now.
I would say that my dad's our expression that my dad always taught me and my brother is hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
I agree. That's a...
So speaking
That's
of cultural
smart
contention, Garrett, do you have something you want to talk about, buddy?
Yes, so I would like to talk about the whole kink debate surrounding Pride. You know, this isn't anything new. It's something that props up every year as we approach June or during the first few days of June. People don't think that kink has a place at Pride. They, you know, will use their children as a argument of why it should basically not exist there. But yeah, I just want to touch on that. It's nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
This, again, every year. And I do think it is important to recognize that those who are against it kind of fall into two different groups. You do have the homophobic people, which, you know, they're going to use any avenue to rail against, you know, the LGBTQ plus community. So they take this, they run with it, they're like, that's disgusting, that's weird, see, these people are just deviants, whatever. And there's not really, I don't give those people any water, obviously, because they're coming at it from a homophobic angle. But then you do have those that are asking the question, is it appropriate for kink and children to integrate at the same event? And they, you know, have good intentions. But I would also, and so you have those two groups, I would also add that second group that I mentioned can be split into two more groups.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are a part of the LGBTQ community themselves and those who are not. And I do think it is important to make that distinction because, you know, if you are straight, if you are a straight couple or a straight person with kids or without kids, and you're kind of you're kind of making this argument of, well, this needs to be something different, this needs to tone it down, this needs to fit what I deem as appropriate. Because again, I feel like at the end of the day, especially when it comes to this, a lot of it is subjective. Like, and so I think if you are someone who is straight, you need to take a step back, maybe. And I don't want to say, you know, straight people can't have an opinion, because again, I think it is important to have straight people attend Pride, have that allyship, have children there, so they can experience that. Again, there are LGBTQ kids, and so I don't want to just say shut up to them, but I do think that it is, oh, well, this is a different group for me, and so in order for me to be 100% okay with it, they need to change what they're doing. So I do think that is an important argument to make. I do want to talk just briefly about the history of the kink community and the LGBTQ plus community.
Please.
So bring on them kinks.
You know, huh?
Bring on them kinks.
Yeah. So
no kink shaming, Davis.
Homosexuality not that long ago was seen as just sexual deviancy, and so it makes sense that, you know, historically speaking, especially, that sexually deviant people who are seen as sexually deviant will form community with themselves. And so yeah, back in the day, if you were homosexual or LGBTQ, anything under that umbrella, you were just seen as sexually deviant. People thought you were weird. People thought there was something wrong with you. Again, homosexuality was classified as a psychological disorder for a time. And so they formed community with themselves. And so, you know, with that shared history, I mean, like, I do have an example to share. So in the early 1980s, when the AIDS crisis began, the leather community was there for those sick and helped care for them when others were afraid to even be in the same room.
Hell yeah.
So, and, you know, and again, a lot of it, you know, queer people had to hide who they were. You know, people who, because, you know, there is overlap, but obviously just because you're in the kink community doesn't automatically make you a part of the queer community, even though there is that overlap. But they had to also hide, you know, that part of themselves. And so, again, like, just that, going back to they established community together. And so, with that being said, to just sit there and be like, oh, gay people are just going to this event so they can be nearly naked, or they can be weird and wild, or whatever, I think is kind of just ignoring that, because there is that culture and there is that shared history.
I would ask, you know, has anybody ever been to Mardi Gras?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of another point I do
or a
have
football
too.
game?
There does seem to be a double standard, because people are okay with, and I know, like, showing skin and having a specific kink isn't exactly the same thing, but people do say that too. They're like, people show too much skin at Pride. But then these people will take their children to a football game, and you'll have, you know, those cheerleaders who are showing a lot of skin. Or just will go to the beach, and you have people wearing Speedos, you have people in bikinis, like, you know, banana hammocks, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it is, I think, a fair point to be like, well, why is it that people showing skin at Pride is seen as this just horrible thing? Oh my God, you're scarring children, when then you'll take your children to the beach or, like, these football games.
I love that line of argument. Oh my God, you're scarring kids. I'm like, kids get scarred all the time.
Yeah.
Seeing your dad and your mom, or catching your parents having sex for the first time, is scarring.
Yeah,
like,
and again,
like
they might be participating in some of those kinks that you walk into.
Kidding.
I've walked in on my parents. Obviously, I can't say they've been doing anything crazy.
Well,
but, you know,
that you know of.
kids, well, yeah, that I know of. But I mean, kids do get exposed to this, and I'm not advocating for, like, you know, you going to Pride and seeing pup play and having your kid, oh, like, go up to them, like, da da da. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that. But at the same time, I mean, kids, they do experience these things, and I think parents should be able to explain to their children what's happening. You don't need to go into the nitty-gritty, but I do think it's, you know, like, it shouldn't be handled with kid gloves all the time necessarily. I know, like, no pun intended. But to just be like, oh, you can't look at any of that, you can't know about any of this until what, you're 18?
Yeah,
You
like,
know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think,
obviously, as kids age, you can kind of maybe be more, I guess, specific about it. Obviously, you don't need to, like I said, you don't need to give the nitty gritty to a freaking 8-year-old, but at the same time, this whole we need to shield our children from anything is just so ridiculous, especially when the point of Pride is a protest, it is a riot, it is a deviation from societal expectations. And so I don't know. What do you guys think about what I've said so far?
I actually really wanted to touch up on this a lot. I want to preface first off, I am a straight white male. I have a lot of privilege. I don't understand all of this. That being said, I really am open to a lot of social ideas. I love learning about this kind of stuff. And so I just wanted to preface that before I give my 2 cents. And I also want to just be like, I'm very open to having my viewpoints changed on this, and I want to understand it to the best of the ability. Because I don't have a whole lot of oppression when it comes to this. So I can't really speak from that point of view. I'm of 2 minds on this though. Because on one end, sex is very normalized in our society in a lot of ways that we don't think about anyways, but it's just sex in a straight manner. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, as a kid, you almost normalize a lot of things. You almost don't even see it anymore as an adult. We don't think about it. On the other end though, I think part of the argument I've heard is in that kind of public display and whatnot, consent is a big issue. And so you have your partner who's consenting, but you don't have people around you that are, and that's something that you want to kind of take into account. And so I'm of 2 minds on that because, yeah, you can go to the beach, you're going to see a lot of skin. You're going to Pride, you're probably going to see a lot of skin. I think you know that going into it. So
Yeah.
I mean, in this these 2 mindsets are really kind of conflicting for me on that, and maybe it's just my heteronormative ideas as well. So that's why I'm trying to just listen in on this and see where I stand more.
I think that, for my perspective is, I have 2 mindsets as well. One of it, it's not my backyard, so it's none of my business. And then the other mindset is that this is about normalization of a community, right? This is the protest. We are here. We are queer. Get used to it. That kind of mantra. So yeah, in my mind, consent should be always sought, but I don't know. There's not I think most Pride Parade events do a really good job of policing a lot of that kind of behavior too. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I mean, Garrett, you probably have witnessed in Pride events, that they usually are pretty they're wild and crazy and fun, but there are people there that are keeping an eye on things, keeping things from getting out of control. So I think that it's not a nothing burger, but I don't think it's an issue. Especially when most 9 times out of 10, when I went to my first Pride Parade, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I went with my friends, and it was just tame, not tame, but I didn't see anything that I would think is anything strange, because I mean, when I grew up, where I grew up in Boise, I mean, I would go to football games all the time with my parents, and you see skin, you see people drinking, you see people partying. There are people that would paint themselves. I remember the body paint suits that some women would wear. So to me, it's if the issue is we don't want kids to be harmed or scarred by this, I think there are institutions in place already to kind of prevent that. But I think the idea of promoting that, I think that the issue is that there's a small majority of people who've took it upon themselves to say no, all the way, 100%, balls to the wall, literally, online, and then there's a small percentage of people who are made up of that heteronormative, pearl-clutching woke culture that says, no, think of the children. When in reality, the vast majority of people that are engaged in this process, they're not hurt by this. This is a Pride event. Does it get raunchy at night? Yeah, but when you get a bunch of people drunk, having a good time on a nice summer day, I mean, I've been to football games. You know, there are always cops. There's always, every single time there was a Boise State game, there always was one couple that got arrested for getting a little too frisky. So you know, it shit happens. I mean, it's an event. So
I think that's something important to touch upon as well. Is Pride is one of the best ways that we can socially like integrate just like the the LGBTQ like community into just our everyday lives. I think like it's the best way to get like acceptance. I think it's the best way to have like every other community kind of just accept it and normalize it as well. I think it's super important that we like as like allies and whatnot would really like.
I got your back, Garrett. I got your back.
As I said, as an ally, like we want to just be super open with that community. I think we want to just be like, we're here for you guys. So, and that's why I really am hesitant to like give a lot of like my perspective on this, is because like there's a lot of history behind it. There's a lot of like emotional like repression that has gone into it. And Pride's like the one way that like a lot of youth can go there and be who they are. And so I think it's super important that we also keep that in mind, that this is like the one time, like chance that a lot of people have to like find people of similar backgrounds and understandings that can relate to them. Like we as humans are like, we're like very communal people, we need like kind of like those relationships and whatnot in life. And I think that's one of the best places to find that is at Pride. So I really want to be more like receptive to a lot of ideas on this as well.
So,
and
go ahead.
I found a quote that I really like that I want to share. So the quote says, "The event is not a petting zoo. It is not a place to observe gay folks in the wild. It is a celebration of a riot that is still ongoing." And you know, like that again, that riot against societal expectations, against what's normal. And so I just think if you're coming at it from the perspective of, oh, well, I'm gonna go, and like, you're kind of viewing it, like, I'm sure a lot of people won't say, like, compare it to a petting zoo, but if you're kind of going with that mindset of like, oh, well, I'm going to view things instead of actually participating and knowing what it's about, like, I don't know, I don't think that's a really fair way to look at it.
It's a super wrong mindset to approach it as.
Well, you don't want to be observed and, you know, poked at by, you know, the lay people, treated like, you know, some kind of giraffe.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I agree with your argument, Davis, to an extent that it is becoming more normalized. But I think it's up to the LGBTQ community to decide how far that goes, because I mean this is their protest. I mean I'm a straight white male, and I've already.
I don't actually think it's becoming more normalized. I just think that if we wanted to get to that point, I guess it's important to view a lot of avenues then.
Well, I mean, I think that.
And that's if we wanted to get to that point. I don't, like, as I said, since I'm not part of that community, I'm not sure like what the long-term goals are for it as well. So really how I'm viewing it is I want to just be like, wherever you guys are going with this, I'm going to back you up on that.
Yeah.
Basically is how I'm viewing it.
Well, and, you know, I guess I want to kind of throw out a question. Is it fair to call it acceptance if there are, if there are kind of prerequisites, or I'm trying to think of the word, like, conditions?
If it's conditional.
Can you really call it acceptance? I mean, again, like, it's, you know, you go, there's people that are different than you, you know, you see things. Again, I'm not, when it comes to, like, people, like, having, like, public sex, obviously that's not okay, you know, and so, but there are laws against that.
Yeah.
That's okay for the straights still, too.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, but then when you're going and you see, maybe you do see, like, cup play, and you know, in your mind, you might think that that's different, that that's weird, whatever. But, like, if you are in the headspace of, well, in order to get this more normalized, in order to get this more accepted, they need to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, I just don't think, like, first of all, is it one thing? And then if the LGBT community, let's say, they're like, fine, we won't have kink at Pride. Is that the only thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it gets kind of
like, I feel like the goalpost might move, and I'm not saying that's like what you're trying to say, Davis. I'm just saying I don't think acceptance should have conditions, because I feel that's more like tolerance.
I feel like you guys are actually kind of misunderstanding me a little bit on this, because I'm actually not saying acceptance from my end, because I just want to be an ally to this. I'm saying, as like the LGBTQ community, I'm not sure what the long-term goals are for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I more just want to be behind that. So if they're trying to more have it like, we're trying to just integrate it into society so that it gets viewed normally, like it's not even viewed as like an LGBTQ like plus like thing, it's just kind of like a normal everyday thing, I want to back you guys up on that. But if you want Pride to be like kind of like still kind of like almost a riot on that, and like this is going against like the normal social standards, I want to back you up that way. So I'm not trying to view it as like an acceptance in that. I'm trying to, I guess I don't understand like the full long-term goals for it, and so I want to, if I can understand that a little more, I'll back up either way on that.
You know,
Does that make sense?
I agree with that too, because I'm in the same boat. Like, I think that at the end of the day, everybody has their kink to say. Like, everybody has their own kink. Everybody has their own thing that gets the ball rolling to say. And I agree with you, Garrett, that, you know, if we make it conditional, it can easily begin to turn into a slippery slope where we add more and more conditions to it.
Yeah, I can 100% see that.
And so I think that what I think me and you can do, Davis, is we can engage in the discourse, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily our community insofar as we're 100% part of it, but we are allies of it, and we will unconditionally be allies of that community. Mm-hmm. Is I think what our goal should be, and be supportive.
I agree 100%.
Because, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think most LGBTQ people are rational enough to understand why you don't want, like, a 3-year-old engaging with a guy that has a dildo suit. I mean, like I'm pretty sure that, you know, like, a 3-year-old probably won't even know what the hell that is.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's also this, like, you know, somebody think of the children argument always kinds of pisses me off. Because you can make the same argument about video games. You can make the same argument about television. You can make the same argument about radio and all these things. I think most of the complaint is a nothing burger brought up as a wedge issue for either attention, which, let's really be honest, most of the people who are bringing this up are doing it for attention. But, I mean, in cases where, like, things get out of hand, I think that most Pride communities and most LGBTQ communities, I think, have the sense and then the appreciation to understand why if something went overboard. You know, like, there's this famous picture of this little girl with a bunch of guys doing pup play, you know, that circulates around the internet. We don't know anything about it. For all we know, that's her dad that she's talking to.
From what it could have been like a Pride event.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't a Pride event?
It wasn't at a Pride event, from what I understand. Anyways,
okay.
Yeah, like
it all off. So that picture has been a lot of misinfo behind it.
Exactly. I mean, that's the perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
like,
just trying to discredit it. Like, they'll, again, there's homophobic people, they'll use whatever they can do. I don't know, it's hard. Like, as someone who is gay, I don't want to tell people, because I do have, like, the mindset of, like, listen, you can be LGBTQ affirming and not necessarily have to go to Pride. Like, you know what I mean? If you are that concerned about your children, and maybe instead of complaining about what they're doing and how the community chooses to express itself, because again, there's, you know, many ways that they do it. Some that you have a problem with. Maybe just wait until your child's old enough to decide for themselves. And, you know, it does suck saying that, because again, I want that, like, support, and I do want it to be more normalized, and I do want it to be more accepted, but at the same time, like, I just don't, you do have that choice to just not go, and just because you don't go doesn't mean that you can't affirm, like, your own children if they come out to you, or, like, other people, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be this thing of, like, you're either homophobic or you're going to Pride. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's...
Yeah, and I think that...
But again, I just don't like the idea of going in, changing how people are doing things, especially for children. I mean, those people didn't choose for you to have the children. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like, I know, like, when you have kids, like, well, I don't know, because I don't have kids, but I can assume, like, your perspective shifts. You want to protect them. I understand. Maybe sometimes that's not completely rational, but I mean, you know, if it's consistent, maybe I can be a little more, like, slightly understanding, but I just feel like these people, a lot of these people complain about it when it's with Pride, but then they don't, like, they'll go to a rated R movie with their kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
people maybe leave their sex toys out, like, parents leave their stuff out and their kid gets into it, or even if they hide it, their kid gets into it. And I mean, they don't, like, you wouldn't necessarily say to that parent, oh, you're, like, a bad parent. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting topic, but I think at the very end of the day, if you are that pressed about it, and you don't, even after understanding the history, the culture, you know, the nuance with it, you can just not go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think another important thing to touch up on, this is oftentimes, like, some people's only chance to really express who they are.
Yeah.
And, like, this is also the only chance for a lot of people in that community to kind of find out about themselves as well. Like, a lot of questioning, like, younger people are going to go there and be like, maybe I am, finally. I think that's really important to remember as well going into it.
Well, you know, the thing is, you don't hear this kind of crap about Comic-Con. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you see a bunch of skin, there's a lot of, like let's really be honest, when Comic-Con's in town, there's funky stuff going down. And that's putting it mildly. Right?
I was going to say, Comic-Con oftentimes has a lot more questionable stuff happening there too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and the thing is that we don't talk about how, you know, there are a bunch of perverts that go to Comic-Con. You know, let's really be honest. There are underage girls there that dress what we can call provocatively, and there are creepy dudes that go to Comic-Con. And why aren't we talking about that? Why is that not an issue? Why is it always, oh, what if kink is at Pride? Well, no. Let's really be honest. If you're being open about your kink, I'm not worried about you, because at least you're being honest. You're saying who you are. It's the creepers that I think we need to be more worried about, and unfortunately, by trying to repress people's behavior, I think it makes it easier for that to kind of remain under the radar, right? So I mean, I think that at the end of the day, the problem that we're dealing with is that these positions or these kinks are seen as perversions or perverted. And my question to these people always, aren't you perverted? Aren't we all perverts? I mean, last time I checked, I mean, the asexual community doesn't make up a large proportion of the human population. So, if that's the case, then I think most people are perverts.
Yeah, I mean...
Everybody has their sexual fantasy.
I do think society as a whole can be more sex positive, and again, saying that doesn't mean firsthand throw your child into the ring, let them see it all. Like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you see that, Billy? There you go. Check out. Go pet that guy.
Subscription. Go nuts, bud.
Don't be a homophobe. Go pet that guy. Go look at that gay guy who's, you know, twirling a baton, you know? Observe. Go poke and prod. Jesus.
Yeah. 7th birthday, I got you a Pornhub premium subscription.
Yeah, it's just gay and trans porn.
I'm not trying to say that, but at the same time, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with expressing your kink. Again, there's caveats to everything, for sure. Obviously, you know, public sex, that's one thing. But, you know, if you want to go to Pride, you are really into leather, you want to, again, with that, especially with that cultural and that, like, shared history, you want to express that. I really don't think there's anything wrong with that. And, you know, I think we can educate our kids more, we can be more sex positive, we can be more open and be more honest without it being that we're sexualizing kids or that we're advocating for kids to somehow participate in this. Like, I don't think those don't have to be the same thing. And so I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Well, there's no easy solution to it because I mean this is a sociological issue, and it's going to take time, right? Like I would say that I can't speak for the LGBTQ community, but I think out of all of us, I'm the oldest person here. I remember when being gay was worse than almost anything else. Like, the only thing worse than being gay was being a pedophile. So like that was, and that's what in the 90s, right? So like I think that for the most part the LGBTQ plus community has done a really good job of normalizing itself. So I think a lot of this is I think a lot of this actually has to come from people who are either projecting their own anxieties onto this, or people who are just doing it for attention. Like, at the end of the day, let's really be honest. Like I said, I think the majority of people who are LGBTQ plus allies don't have an issue with this, and I think the majority of people within the community itself don't have an issue with this because I mean there are already grounds placed. I think most people who even have these kinks, they're showing themselves, but I think they're aware that there's certain kind of behavior that's acceptable around kids. Like, we're assuming that these people are irrational sex deviants, and that, no, I mean, some of these people are parents, for God's sakes. It's like I was saying with the girl that was with the dog, that picture. Even if that wasn't at a pride parade, who knows? Maybe that's her dad. Could be her Uncle Bill.
Yeah.
Well, it's about humanizing. It's about humanizing it.
Yeah, and I did see. I do have like some notes, and I didn't include this in my notes, but I did see while I was researching that a lot of times when you're fighting for custody, if one of the parents, like, their kinky, side to them is like, if that's like exposed, they have like a way, like, their chances of getting custody goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, again, these are people, a lot of them do have kids, or a lot of them want to have kids, and I think you can do all these things and it can be healthy. Again, it's not, I swear, I think some of these people think that, like, you can't, like, do both, and I feel like you can.
Well, it's about that it's about that Judeo-Christian normalization. So, like, this is the thing. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian tradition. That's a made-up term. Like, it's a made-up term from the 1950s, after the Holocaust, as a way of trying to springboard in the Jewish community into the social norms. No, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian normity. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian values. They're just Christian values. And let's really be honest, a specific segment of Christianity that's being talked about. Like, I don't know how many Greek Orthodox people are being represented in this. I don't know how many, like, Lutherans are being represented in this. This is hardcore fundamentalism. And so, any deviation, I mean, let's look at the term deviant. What does it mean to be deviant? It means that you're not a part of the orthodoxy. You're deviating. You're being deviant to the norm. So at the end of the day, like, unfortunately, this gets back to my original point that it's about power. It's about you guys have to do what we say because we're the morally righteous, good people, and you're being naughty. And that's some of the reasons why I actually really love the Pride event, because it's just a huge middle finger to that. No, you can't tell me what to flip and do. Maybe that's that redneck in me, but, I really love that. Like, fuck you. You can't tell me what to do. I'm going to be who I am.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that so long as the allies in the LGBTQ community understand that we're in the same boat when it comes to a lot of social issues, when it comes to a lot of economic issues, that's all that really matters. This is nothing to break ties about. And if you're that concerned about the norm, maybe your priorities are not straight. You see what I did there, guys?
Oh my god. Yeah, I think that I agree with that. I do think there is a segment too that are kind of against it, who are a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and I think there's this idea of being the perfect gay, quote unquote, And so I feel like a lot of these people feel like they have to put out fires when it comes to other people in the community doing things that people like shake their heads at or, stare at wide-eyed.
Well, it's that righteous, it's that righteous, woke. Is that what I was talking about? It's the self-righteousness. I mean, like, let's really be honest. Like, there's no right way to be gay, right? Just like there's no right way to be straight. These are social constructs. The sexuality and attraction that exists in the human mind is a 100% natural process. Like, it's not conditional. It's a part of you from birth. So these are social structures. These are social norms. And, for me, it's like, these social norms change all the time. So there's really no reason why gay people can't express themselves or king people can't express themselves. I mean, won't you think of the children argument doesn't really fly because I think most of these people are aware of that. It's like a lot of these people don't think that people who are kinks are aware that kinks are kind of looked down upon in society. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? There's a reason why they're there. There's a reason why they're protesting. There's a reason why they're part of the community. So,
yeah, like you should have sex to procreate. You shouldn't have fun with it. You shouldn't, try to spice things up, or you know what I mean? Like, I think it's kind of
solely utilitarian. Yes.
I want to ask, like these conservatives if they, have sex for fun. Because, I asked one of my friends one time that, and he was one of the conservatives, and he was like, So when I was working in corrections, and you just had issue with gay people, I'm like, do you not have sex for fun? Well, that's different. How the hell is that different?
Yeah.
If you're going to lay down this biblical talking point, I mean, have you ever had sex with somebody that wasn't your wife? Have you had sex before you were married? And then go down this list, right? So, I mean...
Yeah.
But the thing is that it's like what you were saying before. If you're gonna go down that road, let's go whole hog. If we're gonna moralize sex, I'm gonna moralize your sex as well.
Yeah.
And the thing is, either nut up or shut up. Not all of us can be Ben Shapiro, where he doesn't have sex with his wife until he has kids. Because she's a doctor.
God. Oh, I can't with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to kind of round this all out, if you don't know a whole lot about the history of, LGBTQ plus and kink, maybe do some more research for it. Like if you're watching this video, you maybe were surprised to hear that. Maybe do some more research. Try to be a little more open. Like a lot of people are different from you. Again, even in the queer community, there's a lot of different, there's a lot of different minds. There's a lot of different, thought processes. Like, try to be maybe a little more open. If you have that big of an issue with it and you do have kids, if you don't have kids, then really I don't know why you're choosing to kind of do the most when it comes to, like sharing this argument. If you do have kids, you think it's that detrimental, you could always just not go.
Yeah.
I don't think it's worth it to just tell these people what to do, tell them what's right and what's wrong. And, I think people should be free in their own skin. I mean, obviously to a certain point, but again, we do have laws. There are things that are illegal. And, people just need to look at Pride in a more positive light. We need to have fun with it. And, it's not 24/7. It's 1 month, a few parades. These aren't people in the kink community walking down the street, home from work, in their... You know what I mean? It's not...
They're not dressed up like they're...
And again, that shouldn't even matter, but...
What are they called?
It's not... Again, I feel like a lot of people don't even go to these parades. If you're someone like that, you need to find something better to do with your time and let people be people. And I think that's...
Guys,
a good way to end it.
Let's really be honest here, okay? We all know that Donald Trump does not have sex unless to procreate.
Oh, gosh.
Oh my God.
We all know that, right?
Yeah.
We know that, right? I mean, Donald Trump, he's just, and everything else about him is just fake news.
Yep.
He only has sex with Melania It's the only person he's ever had sex with, except for the people that he created. Wait, he didn't just have sex with Melania. Oh
He's
God.
had multiple wives.
Oh God. Oh no.
Again, the time where that was seen as just so horrible and so wrong.
That's the funny
You
thing.
had
Like,
to make it work with your one and only wife.
that's the funny thing. Like, divorce was a huge issue for like the conservative movement until a lot of prevalent conservative politicians began to get divorces, like Ronald Reagan. Funny that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess we'll lead off to my conversation about power. Ergo, the filibuster.
Yeah.
So, do you guys know what the filibuster is?
I do, but
Any bits
it's,
and pieces.
I feel like I don't completely understand it.
So, the filibuster is a course of order when it comes to bills. So, the way our legislation process works is there's a series of customs and rules that are established by each branch of our legislature. So there's the things like decorum. You can't say that like Chuck Schumer can't stand up and say, I think that Mitch McConnell is a motherfucker. If he does that, he is, he's out of order. He's basically disrupting the decorum. And the whole point of this is to kind of create a sense of organization in these bodies. So there is a point to these rules and customs. So I'm not saying, oh, let's just throw all that out. There are reasons for what this is. And so these are structural forms of trying to introduce pieces of legislation like bills. The filibuster is one of those things. And the filibuster, traditionally speaking, was always seen as a major course of action by a minority within the Senate, because this pertains particularly to the Senate. So the Senate is far more rigid, far more constructed, even in comparison to the House. And the reason for that is it was considered the upper body of the legislature. The reason why it was the upper body of the legislature is that this gets back to the whole original debate that our country had. Are we going to be a democratic republic, or are we going to be a democratic republic? Can people govern themselves, or do they need Hamiltonian-esque elites guiding their hand? Because we're a bunch of ignoramuses that, couldn't find Iraq on the map, even though most people were able to do that. Ignorance is not the issue if you have the resources to enlighten them. If people are willfully ignorant, then they're just being stupid. So that's that deal. But the important thing is that the Senate is the upper body. We have 100 senators. And the other thing about the Senate is that every state gets 2 senators. And a lot of people have issues with this. I'll get into my arguments with that later on. But the filibuster was first introduced to the Senate in 1806 by Aaron Burr, actually, or Aaron Burr when he was vice president with Thomas Jefferson. A lot of people forget that he was actually Thomas Jefferson's first vice president. Then it was Madison. The vice president was the president of the Senate, and he basically said that redebating on or continuing a debate on a piece of legislation that had already been discussed was redundant. But what we consider the Federalist faction disagreed and kept pressing that, in fact, no, there should be debate. If there's enough contention, debate should continue. And then by 1806, after Aaron Burr was out of the Senate, wasn't the vice president anymore, a rule was put into place that was in 1806. It was called the 1806 rule, that basically lays down the groundwork for the filibuster. So the filibuster is the idea that if a senator basically wants to continue to debate a piece of legislation, they can continue to debate a piece of legislation until cloture is able to be enforced. And cloture basically is 2/3 or 3/5 of the Senate need to basically vote on ending the debate. And so this gets into the minutia of the nitty-gritty of how the Senate operates. For our intents purposes, the filibuster is a rule that was designed for specific pieces of legislation. pieces of legislation like the Missouri Compromise, the National Bank, huge piece of legislation that would really change the structure of government and government's relationship with the rest of the country. It was never intended, if you will, to be used as anything that my rival puts forward. I'm going to filibuster, because that's disruptive, and it kind of goes up against the precedence of that custom or that norm or the rule in the Senate. But the original rule and subsequent rules haven't defined it well enough to basically annul those problems. So the reason right now why we need a supermajority is because Mitch McConnell is the first minority leader in the Senate to basically galvanize enough support within his party to basically prevent filibusters from reaching cloture.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Go ahead.
So it's the idea that so they're not voting on the actual issue. They're voting for the closure or whatever you're saying. So that's what you see when people, like, when they put up the vote up, you're not seeing them vote on the actual issue, you're just seeing them try to vote to close so that then they can vote on the issue?
Not necessarily. And so, pieces of legislation in the Senate and the House come in different directions. So, specifically speaking, it is the prerogative of the House of Representatives for tax increases or financial shifts in the budget to come from the House. The Senate can't do that. The Senate can't decide on raising taxes or not. The House has to. And the House has to vote on it. And it has to originate from the House. So the Senate can't have a bill that has tax increases on it and then send it to the House to have the House vote on it. It has to come from the House. So there are normal procedures, and all pieces of legislation are open to debate, and there are formal systems in place. This is where the House Whip and the Senate Majority Leader, and the Senate and the House Majority and Minority Leaders come into play, because they decide who they put forward for the debates. And so usually there's an idea that you debate the piece of legislation, bring out your arguments, and also possibly offering amendments to legislation. Add on top of that, there are also committees. And it's in these committees where a lot of power is held in the legislative process. Because it's in the committees where they decide how to structure the bill. It's in the committees how they define the language of bill. It's also in the committees if they decide to add amendments to bills. And each committee basically has its own territory, its own turf, if you will. Like there's the Senate Budget Committee that Bernie Sanders is the head of, which is a really powerful position in government. I mean, the majority, the committee leader for the budget is, I would say, probably in the top 5 most important positions in government. Just because of how much influence that person has when it comes to how we arrange our finances and the language that we use in our finances. So that's a really important thing. But the key thing here is that the legislative process, I mean, I know this is really, really dry, but the key thing here is that in most debates and with most bills, usually after that initial sequence with amendments and discussions of amendments, discussions of, the value or the problems of the bill, usually it's put up for a vote. But if one of the people in the debate phase of this decide that they don't want to end the debate, they have the right to not end the debate. And so a filibuster is put in effect. And the way the filibuster is structured is it doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm in the Senate 24/7, talking until it's over. It could be held over, a period of time. And every single time when the Senate adjourn or the Senate is brought together, they could go to the president and say, "Are you continuing your filibuster?" And yeah, I'm continuing my filibuster. So this is where cloture comes into it, because a vote for, and so long as you get 3/5 of the vote, the cloture is brought forward, and then it just becomes a straight up line vote on the legislation that's basically put forward.
Okay, so then they voted that. Okay, so for the closure, they voted.
To end the debate.
Through, they need the 3/5 for that, right?
Yep.
And then they go on to vote for whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
that makes more sense.
Well, the thing is that the filibuster was never intended to be used this way. It never was intended for that. It was intended for like major events, because the theory was that it would be really hard for a current situation with Mitch McConnell to come into play, because senators back in the day, there was this expectation of delivery, right? And on top of it, the Senate, each senator basically had their own personal state agenda that they wanted to get forward. So filibusters were eating at time. There's only so many votes you're able to have. There's only so much debate. The legislative process is slow. That's by design, so there is debate. So there is discussion about this. The problem as a means of basically preventing legislation getting passed. And so it's basically just obstruction. So this leads into the next point. If it's basically being used this way, the Senate has the option of getting rid of the filibuster. This is not constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution granting Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party inevitable filibuster. All they have to do is have a means and order vote, and that's always a line vote of majority versus minority. And what the majority says is basically the new rules and customs and form of Senate discussion. So they could get rid of the filibuster tomorrow if they wanted to.
Do they still debate on it? Can you filibuster a vote on the filibuster?
No.
That's actually what I was just about to ask
No,
myself.
it's means. It's ways and means. No, it's not ways and means. Well, it is kind of ways and means. Ways and means basically means how you operate within the Senate or how you operate within Congress.
Okay.
But it's a point of order, and it's about the customs and rules of the Senate, and that you can't filibuster something that is about that, because it does not pertain to legislation. The filibuster only pertains to legislation. The Senate could basically say you're not allowed to chew gum in the Senate, and that's a line up or down vote. So the reason why the filibuster has been around for so long is that it's a huge benefit to a majority faction. And most people have the reason to understand that, well, at some point I might be in the majority, or I might be in the minority, so, I don't want to get rid of it. But it's been so abused and so broken that they even had to they changed the rules on the filibuster not that long ago, back in 2013 and back in 2017, for presidential appointments and for pieces of major legislation for the operation and security of the state.
So it really has been getting used and abused.
Yeah, that's why reconciliation, it doesn't matter how much Mitch McConnell hops up and down, so long as pieces of legislation. And this is where the person that was the parliamentarian comes into play.
Yeah.
This is why the $15 minimum wage was taken out, is because the parliamentarian doesn't have any real power. They don't have the ability to control the quote-unquote norms and decisions of the Senate. The Senate has control of that. The parliamentarian is simply just an advisor to the Senate. That's all they are. And they're appointed, and they go from administration to administration. They're just there as an advisory role. The Senate decides who they are. That's why this whole, the parliamentarians said that this was not, good order. Was BS. Like the Republicans are going to run that, look at, there's a $15 minimum wage now. And the parliamentarian said it wasn't right. Nah. This was a way of giving Joe Manchin and Christine Sinema and many other quote-unquote conservative Democrats a way out. And which I think, ironically, has actually backfired on a number of them, which, is not surprising.
Yeah.
But suffice to say, that's basically the filibuster, and Chuck Schumer tomorrow could do what is called the nuclear option. People call it that. I don't know why. It's really not that big. It really, in all practicality, it's not that big of a deal. It'll just change how the Senate operates to where it's now just simple majority up or down votes on all pieces of legislation after the debate. Now, it sucks because, it means that it's harder to add amendments to legislation. Because that's usually what the filibusters were designed for, was I'm going to filibuster this until like certain amendments are added to the legislation. And you can see throughout, from, I want to say 1911 when they started actually counting the filibuster on, like, it was pretty, you see a really flat line until Obama's president. Then all of a sudden you see it skyrocket like that. So it is being used and abused. So I would say if I'm Chuck Schumer, bust up the filibuster.
So do you think they will bust it up?
No, because I mean it gives Joe Manchin and others enough, cover so that they don't frustrate their donors, which I think is in the long run going to shoot them in the foot. Because I mean most of the donors, and ironically the donor class, is beginning to look at the Republican Party kind of like this, like I don't know what these guys are about. I mean, this is part of the whole thing we were talking about earlier, where there are crazies in the Republican Party that would eat their own young to get their own way. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I wouldn't let her around any kid. I'm worried that she's going to eat him.
Yeah.
But then there are Mitt Romneys, right, where they have a clear agenda, and they have donors. So, this is the real problem for the Republican Party right now. The Democrats, on the other hand, really just need to get more disciplined. And right now, what's really funny is that you are seeing Joe Biden going after Joe Manchin and Christine Sinema. There's no reason why we can't have infrastructure. There's no reason why we can't have, a jobs bill. It's to their benefit. It's to their donors' benefit. Are they really worried about that much about the debt or inflation? No, I don't think so. Most Americans don't even know what inflation is. They don't care. What they care about is, are my roads going to get fixed up? Are our schools going to get fixed up? Are we going to actually have some kind of investment in our community again? So, but the reason why I say this is about power is that it is about power. Who gets to have power in the Senate? So Joe Manchin wants to play kingmaker, but he couldn't work himself out of a cardboard box because everything he's doing is so transparent. And when you do that enough times, it makes it obvious what you're doing. And if he thinks that the Republican Party is not going to attack him from the left, then he's an idiot. Of course they are. They don't have any principles. They don't care anymore. When was the last time they cared about this? Ever since Richard Nixon, they've been a party that's willing to shift. They're the blowfish party, remember? They'll do whatever it takes to get their legislation through.
Yeah.
True. I think the best thing that can come out of this right now is that Joe Biden has called Christian Sinema weird vibes.
Yeah. Like what?
He said she gives weird vibes.
Yeah, that's an actual quote from Joe Biden. He's like, yeah, she has some weird vibes.
And I'm not the one who coined this, but she really acts like that. Her name's Evie Trinket from Hunger Games. May the odds be ever in your favor.
Those memes, oh my gosh, they send me. They're so funny.
She does.
Yeah,
though.
it's that she curtsied. She curtsied when she voted down on the wage, $15 minimum wage. Like, who does that? Like, but this is the thing. This is where the whole
dance. I was like, oh,
this is where the whole thing is backfiring, right? So Joe Manchin lives in a state where the average person there is making less than $30,000 a year. Okay, the coal mining industry that exists there is virtually non-existent now because they've stripped West Virginia of most of its coal. There's no future with the Koch brothers. They got what they wanted and they're going to de-invest. So what are you going to do? How are you going to continue to play this I'm a rough and tough redneck Democrat to a populace that really doesn't give a shit?
Yeah.
Like, let's really be honest here. Like, at a certain point, rubber hits the road. And unfortunately, people who are in that condition are way more open to fascist, alt-right talking points than this I'm a tough redneck and I'm going to keep them socialists in line.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They really don't care at that point. So, and this is where the left really needs to get serious. Because we ran like somebody ran against Alison Lundgren Grimes. Was that her or was she against Mitch McConnell?
I think she was No, what was that?
Mitch McConnell was
It was in Kentucky.
Yeah, it was a different woman, I'm pretty sure.
But-
Cassie McGrath?
Yeah, but I'm talking about like the Justice Democrat progressive candidate in the primaries. Like, if we can't win Democratic Party primaries, we're not going to win in general elections. And if we can't, we can't form a third party because we can't even win flipping Democratic primaries.
Yeah.
There's a math problem here. This is the problem I have with like the Jimmy Dore stands. Okay, there's a math problem here. Okay, if you can't win in a Democratic Party primary, and let's be honest, the Democratic Party at the best of times is left centrist, but most of the time it's just centrist. There's nothing new about that. This has been the way that people describe the Democratic Party since the 50s. Okay, there's nothing new about that. So, if you can't win there, why the hell do you think you're going to win in a general election with a party of your own? When both political parties see it in their best interest to attack you. Or one party is more than willing to ally themselves with you, knowing full well you're going to split the ticket down the line with the Democrat. Like, either you need to have enough of a base to win all out and have a clear majority, or you need to work in coalition with somebody. And unfortunately for the left, our coalition's with the Democratic Party. There's no viable option right now. You know, we can work on a third party, but I mean, let's really think about it. I mean, look, you guys heard of the People's Party movement for a People's Party? It's not even a People's Party now? Where are they going to win? Where's
that movement pretty much died anyways. You don't even hear about it anymore.
Well, it's because, I mean, it's nonsensical. Like, I would rather have a people's faction inside the Democratic Party, because at least that's more coherent. Like, and that's the thing I would say, is that, you know, what the left really needs to do is stop calling itself the progressives. We're the people's faction. We're interested in people politics, humanist policies. We're interested in passing legislation that are designed to democratize our legal system, our economic system, and our political system. That's what we're about. We believe that everyday lay people have the ability to govern themselves, and you know what? Maybe they might know what's best for them. Or, if that, we need to give them an argument to why they need to vote for legislation. Just saying, well, the science says, hasn't really worked out very well. Now, some of it is true, yeah, masks are a good idea. Surprisingly enough. But just saying, well, because of science... No, it doesn't work. Maybe, because the mask isn't there to protect you. The mask is there to protect other people from you. Wearing the mask does not prevent you from getting the sickness. Because it's on your body, it's out in the ether, it's out there in the cosmos, it's going to hit you. Wearing that mask prevents transmission from a human host.
Other people.
And so if it dies on your skin, or if it dies in the process, then it reduces the amount of COVID that's out there. And now let's add on the fact that now people are getting, you know, vaccines. That means that the virus itself is dying in these people. You can still contract COVID, but since you have the vaccine, it's not going to affect you near as bad. You're going to begin to kill off the virus, and if you're wearing your mask, you're preventing it getting spread. That's an extra 10 seconds of discussion with people that adds a level of nuance to the mask debate that I think is going to, at least to some people, convince them, oh, maybe wearing a mask is not that big of a deal.
I don't know, the anti-mask movement, they're pretty diehard.
Oh yeah, well that's because it turned into a can.
I feel like it has been explained that way. Like, I'm not saying, like, what you're saying hasn't happened, because I'm sure some people are like, oh yeah, because science, but I've heard it, like, explained, like, 1,000,001 times. At this point, if you're not willing to do it, you're just rejecting it.
You know what?
It's not that it hasn't been explained to you, you're just rejecting it.
What do you call willful ignorance?
Yeah.
Stupidity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to stand on that. Like, if you're being willfully ignorant, you're being stupid. You know, there's no other way of describing that. Like, there are ignorant people, and that's fine. You know, people are ignorant of things. There's people ignorant about pride. There are people who are ignorant about, you know, weather. I mean, that happens. Ignorance is not a sin, in my mind. Ignorance is just a common state of being. We're all ignorant when we're born.
Yeah.
It's just that when you're willfully ignorant and you're choosing to remain ignorant on a subject because, you know, your feces are hurt, you're just being stupid. and should be treated accordingly.
Yeah, and I don't, because I'm not expert in, epidemiology, and so I think when you're one person, because I'll point to people and be like, well, this professional, this person who's working in the field and has done so for years and has the professional education required, has said this, and people reject that. Like, they're like, well, why does it matter if they say it? And it's like, because in our society, we can't all be experts in all fields.
Yeah, we can't know everything, sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
it's like what I tell people all the time. Like, I might not be a physicist, but I know that if I jump off a tall building, I'm probably going to die.
Yeah.
Do you really want to test that theory out?
But that's, I mean, sure, but the reason we have these different fields and the people who are experts in these fields is so we can turn to them in times like this. You know what I mean? Like, with the whole, like, virus thing, people were rejecting just the CDC, the WHO, like, all these, like, institutions. And just being like, well, I Googled this, I found this other guy who had a differing opinion, and he's a doctor, he's a chiropractor, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
He has a doctorate in Christology.
Yeah, and they chalk it up to you're not doing your own research, you're just listening to what's being told of you.
It's very similar to the anti-vax.
Yeah, here's the thing. There are always going to be snake oil salesmen and stupid people who believe them.
Sure, yeah.
And whether or not a large enough proportion of our society is influenced by that, we're always going to deal with it. Here's the thing. Humanity is always going to have idiots. This is why we're never going to have a communist utopia. We're always going to have idiots. There's always going to be that guy that decides, what if it's a good idea if I kick, alligator in the ass? Let's see what happens. There's always going to be that person. There's no way around that. And this is part of that whole thing where I talk about power and talk about coalition building. I'd rather take people as they are and work on them over time, because I think most people can be reasoned with, or at least most people can be convinced. The issue is, right now, the left isn't really good at that. Let's really be honest. I mean, there are people like Vosh, Dave Pacman, Mike Figueroa, Dave, what's his name? Rational National. What's his name?
Dave Dole.
Dave Dole. Kyle Kalinske. And even Crystal Ball, that I think are really personable and they're really good at talking to people. But with every one of those guys, you have a flippin' Jimmy Dore. And so I think we need to talk about power. There is no righteous monolith of people out there that are the people. Okay? When we say we're a people's party or a people's faction or for the people, when we say we're populist or socialist, what we're not saying is that people are infallible. What we're saying is that the policies and the legislation that we want to see passed and enforced are beneficial to people. I don't believe in this lay wisdom of the common man. It's very romantic. I think that it has certain attributes that I appreciate. Because you know what? I think your lay person isn't thinking constantly of, how to make a better society. Because once you start going down that road, I mean, you get into some crazy territory. Like I tell people all the time, like the Nazi Party was not a working class party. Who was it made up of? It was made of professionals. Every time they tried to gain into workerist fields, it never panned out. It never panned out. Like in Munich, in Brandenburg, in Frankfurt, and all these places where the Nazis tried to grow in northern Germany with their workerist messaging, it never worked because there already was a socialist party and there was already a communist party. I mean, you were more likely to find more dentists in the Nazi Party than coal workers. So, I mean, this gets back to the whole point of power, though. So, the Democratic Party doesn't understand power because they're trying to be the good guy party. There's no such thing. It's not right. It's not good versus evil. It's about power. It's about legislation. It's about getting things through that benefit your coalition versus the other coalition. The New Deal did not... Here's the thing. The New Deal did not just manifest itself out of the goodness of Roosevelt's heart. Right? Like, we can root for Roosevelt, but Roosevelt was a guy, like anybody else, who had power. And he made mistakes with his powers. He abused that power. I mean, he was a person with power. Power corrupts. We know this. But with that power, and with the Congress behind him, he was able to pass key pieces of legislation that made people's life better.
Mm-hmm. Things that we still rely on to this day.
Exactly. So, what Chuck Schumer shouldn't be thinking about is, oh, what are the optics of me basically doing the nuclear option? You know, what if the Republicans are mean to me now? It should be, no, screw Mitch McConnell. He's making my life a living hell. I might be his friend. I might go to his daughter or his kid's birthday. But it's my power. If Mitch McConnell stops being your best friend, I mean, I'm sorry, but I think I could think of worse things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a big loss in the whole scheme.
Well, I mean, the guy is flipping Skeletor. I mean, he doesn't have much time left on this earth.
Find a turtle somewhere else.
You know,
So,
like,
honestly,
like he's not going to be there forever. He doesn't. And the thing is that Mitch McConnell doesn't care. He knows he's not going to live forever. So why not go whole hog? What do we just see with this current Supreme Court nomination? They don't care. So no, what we need to do is we need to push the Democratic Party to get rid of the fucking filibuster, because then it will matter more who wins the Senate. And this gets to my point about what we originally talked about with abortion. The left needs to get people who are governors and state representatives. Mm-hmm. We need to be shown as viable. We need to have our legislation tested in the states. Now, some of our legislation can't work in the states because they're naturally national, like Medicare and the Green New Deal. But we can pass other pieces of legislation that are of the left that will help people, like public housing is a really big one. Transportation. State budgets with transportation is a big thing. How transportation is structured inside the state, inside the cities. We need to have mayors. We need to be all over the place. You need to be able to not be able to throw a rock without hitting a leftist that's in office.
Yeah.
That's how the Tea Party was successful. That's how the Republican Party's been so successful. They have institutionalized their movement, their framework, and their structure to such a degree that it's incredibly hard to run against them. All the while, the Democratic Party doesn't seem to have a clue. So this gets back to my point about, like, Joe Biden. I really hope that my instincts with him are true. I'm hoping that he sees himself as 70 plus. He's got maybe a decade left on Earth, so why not go out with a goddamn bang?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not go out with a goddamn bang? You're not worried about being reelected. Like, if you're reelected...
Joe, it was just a gamble. You know, he's wide awake under there.
You know what? I actually do believe that. I actually do believe that. Because the thing is that he allowed the other centrists to put their foot in their mouth. And he just looks like, nice, friendly Obama Vice President Joe Biden, who gets muddled every once in a while, but he seems sensible. But underneath, Joe Biden did the number one thing you do as a leader. You immediately after the primary, he immediately embraced Bernie Sanders. Maybe not all of his issues, but he embraced him. Because that's what a leader does. You might have people who are underneath you or people who you work for that you disagree with, but as a leader, he needs to bring the Democratic Party forward. And he was successful at that. I'd rather have Joe Biden, the Joe Biden model, in every single Senate, House, State House, and governor election against the Republican Party than the Hillary Clinton or even the Obama model. Because more people came out to vote for Joe Biden. And this whole charismatic, you need to be charismatic and likable thing, I think that's horseshit then and it's horseshit now. I think it helps. but it really is who's able to bring out more people on election day. That's democracy, baby. That's how this works. It's how it's worked since the get-go. People who are able to vote, the more people who are able to vote that come out to vote for you win. That's why Jefferson and the Democratic Party remained in power for so long. Because they had more people come out to vote on election day than the Whigs or the Federalists. Until the Republican Party came along. And that's how this works. That's how this works. It's called power. So does that mean that we have to deal with conservative Democrats? Yeah. It means we have to deal with Joe Manchins and Christian Cinemas, who have weird names. It means we have to deal with them, but it also means that what the left needs to get is clout. Because here's the thing. If there are more progressive Democrats than there are conservative Democrats, how do you think the legislation is going to tend or swing? It's going to be more progressive.
Progressive, yeah.
And now it's the conservatives' turn. And if the conservatives say, well, I'm just going to vote for the Republicans, okay, you just told me what I needed to know. So any amendments that you want for future pieces of legislation, kiss that goodbye. Any favors, kiss that goodbye. Why the hell should I work with you if you're not willing to work with me? So I think that's what's really happening right now between Joe Biden and Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. They're angling for more amendments, and then what they want is more prestige and more important positions in the Democratic Party. I think Joe Biden is willing to accommodate them so long as he's able to maintain his optics. So this is why we need to stop listening to fucking Jimmy Dore. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He's a brain jackass that's crying at the moon. I mean,
yeah, Jimmy Dore is a mess.
You know, a year ago, if you would have told me I would have said that, I would have thought you were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, no. If you are so deranged by the Democratic Party that you're not willing to see that the Republican Party is clearly way worse as a political institution, then you have a bone in your head.
Yeah, I 100% agree. What a wild turn of events the last few years have been.
Well, I think what it is just the masks have fallen off. You know, when chips are down, that's when you know who your friends are.
Yep.
Okay, so now that we got through the meat of things, I think we should have some food for thought. So, what do y'all think of them UFOs?
Oh my god.
Yeah, no thank you.
I don't know if we want to do this.
Oh, come on, guys. They're UFOs. What if they're from pizza people? Don't you want to meet pizza people?
Hard no.
Okay, what if they were all Muppets?
I would love that if they were
No.
Muppets.
No, I would hate that.
Wow, look, Garrett just aged like 7 years when he sat back like that. Oh my gosh.
No, not the Muppets. Not Kermit the Frog.
No.
No. No?
Look at that. Oh.
Just no.
Here's one thing I think that it is important to discuss this because this is a really good game of power optics. So the CIA is investing in UFOs. They're not investigating the existence of aliens. So, what does this tell us? This tells us that unidentified flying objects aren't just figments of people's imagination. So there are unidentified flying objects. Now, they can be anything, and I'm not going to get into are they aliens or not? What I am going to say is the reason why this is a good game of power optics is that with this, they're able to divert questions about this by simply just stating the obvious that they may exist. So if they are secret projects by the government, they get to remain secret. If they are actually alien craft that are flying around, they get to remain secret. It might seem strange, but all they're doing is investigating if they exist. If you actually look at what the CIA is doing, it's not about, what they are and what we know about them. It's, are they real? So it's power optics. It's a distraction.
Well, okay.
So anyway, getting back to my point. What do we want to talk about with food for thought? You Muppet haters.
not 100% sure.
Do you want to talk about Benjamin Netanyahu?
Oh yeah. I forgot. He's on his way out.
You know, it's kind of funny. If you spend a decade in power, and the only thing you're able to achieve is mass slaughter and mass death within your own community, it's almost as if you cease to be likable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially when it's at the expense of your own community for foreign and developers that are investing in Israel. Because most of the companies that are benefiting from the West Bank program are not Israeli companies. Fun stuff.
Who would have thought?
Problem though is, you know, who's replacing him doesn't seem to be that much better.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm trying to view it as the Joe Biden versus Trump thing. You know, there's some improvements.
I would hope so.
Mm-hmm.
At least now the right wing has to deal with the centrists with this coalition.
Yeah.
So I think there actually is going to be some legislation, and hopefully there is some change in what they're doing. But I don't think any major solution is going to come out of this. Very rarely comes out of coalition governments. But it gives the left of Israel maybe some breathing room to actually get, you know, its ball rolling if it wants to. What else do you guys want to talk about from some food for thought?
Actually,
Ooh.
do you think we could end soon?
Oh, come on.
We have been, well, it has been almost 3 hours, so,
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I love this, but it is going on maybe a little too long.
Okay. Closing arguments, guys? Closing
What was
statements? Closing arguments, closing statements?
I just think the big one for me is just watch, as I said, the stuff I was talking about today with the Texas abortion bill. I think we just need to pay attention to what's going on there. And don't let any dissuading arguments come into play. I think we need to basically shut down where we can on that right now. It's important. It's heading to the Supreme Court at some point. Just keep an eye on it.
Mm-hmm. Garrett?
Just be kind to everyone, you know. People,
True.
people, you might not understand something. You might think something's weird. But I think it is important to be open and to be kind. And like we said earlier, I think is important to reiterate, if your acceptance comes with conditions, I don't think it's actually acceptance, and you should work on that.
You know, building on top of that, I want to quote the late, great Michael Brooks. Be hard on institutions and soft on people. We're all people.
Oh, such a good quote.
We're all people. We all make mistakes. We all make bad decisions. You know, we just got to love each other. We're all in this together. You know, there's no other place. We're the only human race, and this is our only home. So, you have a lot less hate and more love, guys and gals. You know, and that's the only thing we gotta go. I mean, and remember, a lot of what we're seeing right now is the crying obfuscation of people filled with hate. You know, there's a really great movie out there. It's called The Great Dictator. And there's an ending speech that's done by Charlie Chaplin that I think best exemplifies what the left should be about.
I've seen it. It's a gorgeous quote.
You know, look it up. Check it out. You know, have the love of humanity in you. Because you know what? Despite all of our problems, all of our issues, all the evils, there's a lot of good. So, especially during Pride Parade, show a lot of love and give a lot of love.
Yeah.
Well, this has been GoodFellas History. Thank you for watching. And remember, if you like this, subscribe and like and share. Y'all have a great day. Say bye, fellas.
Bye.